one last big bit of news before we wrap up the show for this time around, and it's kind of a follow-up to what we were talking about earlier in actually our last podcast, episode 26, the Reboot Awakens, where we talked about the possibility or the growing possibility of Kevin Magnussen replacing Pastor Maldonado at Renault due to Pastor's sponsors PDVSA in their own financial crisis of their own, and the possibility of that happening. Turns out we were right. It turns out Kevin Magnussen is all set to be unveiled as Renault's second driver on Wednesday. So by the time you're listening to this, it's probably already happened. But at the time of recording, it's looking like it's going to be Magnussen. When Pastor has already tweeted his declaration that he is no longer going to be on the grid for next season. He's taking a sabbatical from racing. So, King, the internet got their wish on this one.
Yeah, it's basically all but confirmed, as you say. On Wednesday, Renault is going to launch their car in Paris with Kevin Magnussen, Jolyon Palmer, the racing driver, and also their team principal. I think, the team principal is ART's current team principal, Frederick Vasseur. So it seems like they have a fairly strong lineup when it comes to that part, and it seemed inevitable that PDVSA wasn't going to come to an agreement with Renault, so Pastor wasn't going to be able to stay.
Yeah, that's how it came across closer to the time of recording this episode, that it looked like more and more likely as was going to happen. And Autosport pretty much put it out today that it's all but done now. Magnussen is there. He's going to be alongside Jolyon Palmer next year. Pastor is done. And if there's one hilarious thing I want to draw from all this, it's that the U-turns on Pastor in the space of a couple of days have been visible from space. It's right next to the Great Wall of China. It's just hilarious that Pastor, who was the internet's punching bag and whipping boy for 4 years, at least 4 years of his F1 career, and now all of a sudden he's gone. It's like, oh no, we're gonna miss him. We're gonna miss his antics. He might actually not have been that bad. Like, it was that bad. It was that bad on my timeline. Like, I follow some idiots half the time anyway, unfortunately. So it's one of those inevitable situations. But, they retweet other people who say the similar things. And, it's like, Also, Sport put out a column about an hour before we started recording this podcast that basically, was Pastor ever that bad, or was he set for a big rise in 2016? See, this is how it's gone now. There's no middle ground on Pastor. I mentioned this last episode, and I mentioned it again. There is no middle ground on Pastor Maldonado. It's either people thought he was a joke and he was terrible, or people thought he was actually pretty good. There's no middle ground on him.
There really isn't.
It infuriates me that there's like no middle ground on Pastor Maldonado's perception as a driver. Like, some people think he's genuinely great. Other people want to take the piss and make shitty websites about him, Gillen. But, it's a situation where he's now become this great big entity of Formula One as the crashing guy. He's the internet's punching bag. So, I mean, Adam, how do you want to look at it, mate? Because I just look at it like, why is everybody U-turning so quick?
Well, I'd just like to say it's quite nice that now the greatest driver not in F1 is now back in F1 again. So lovely. The internet got its wish. But on the Maldonado point, I think, number one, the internet might be in a bit of trouble here because its favourite whipping boy, Pastor Maldonado, is going away. Romain Grosjean's got very good the last few years. And the man who was all set to be the new Pastor Maldonado, Mr. Lance Stroll, was actually really good in the Rolex 24 when he drove for Chip Ganassi. So, who's next? Basically, at this point, Twitter will be fascinating to watch during the Australian Grand Prix. But I think a lot of eyes are going to be on Jolyon Palmer. If he trips up once, he is going to be the new Maldonado, the new joke of the internet. But wouldn't it be funny if it was Kevin Magnussen? I really don't want to wish bad on anyone, but wouldn't it be hilarious if Kevin Magnussen had a shocker in Australia? Just from the point of the internet would melt down.
I put it on Twitter. I said it on Twitter. I'll say it here. Marcus Ericsson, you're up.
Oh, God. Don't lose it in a straight line again, please.
I feel sorry for Katie McConaughey.
Katie, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I know he's actually got some fans, but let's be real. If you had to look through this and pick out one dude, the guy that lost it in a straight line would probably get picked 9 times out of 10. Don't come after me. I know you've got a boyfriend now. Please, like, forgive me. But like I said, Marcus Ericsson's next man up.
If you want to host the next episode of Motorsport 101 because Dre's been beaten up, send your applications to...
They haven't got my address yet. But yeah, like for me, again, the U-turn is pretty hilarious to me, in my opinion, on this one. That, you know, people have all of a sudden got an affection for Pastor. It's a shame because he always came across like a good guy.
Yeah,
he came across like a good guy, and he did genuinely improve from where he was at. He has got a race win to his name. Yep. His career wasn't a waste of time, and he spent 5 years doing what he loved doing, and that is what he should probably take away from all that more than anything else. And, you know, the criticism of his career, I think, has been over-exaggerated to a large degree because the internet likes having a punching bag. They like having their retweets and their likes lined up on deck for making easy jokes. So and memes, of course. So, you know, it's how places like Grand Prix Diary and you know, Racing Fuma get their names off the back of seeing Pastor fail. So, you know, it's a key part of how F1 Twitter looks at these things. So it's unfortunate. I wish Pastor the best in whatever he decides to do next. I hope it's not the end of the line of his entire career. I think he'd be amazing in Formula E, for example. I think he's the kind of that'd be a real nice boost to that kind of series. You know, I'm curious to see what he ends up doing next. And I think he could be great in another mold somewhere. So, yeah, that pretty much is the long and the short of it for this episode of the podcast. I told you we didn't have very much to talk about this time around. hence why we're fortnightly as opposed to weekly for the next, at least, I'd say, 2 episodes.